Would you still call someone your soulmate after one picture ruins everything? That question slammed into me the moment I saw Ethan's face freeze, like the world had just handed him a version of me he never signed up for. 1 second, he was scrolling through my phone, laughing at dumb memes. The next, his fingers stopped on a folder I never meant for anyone to see. My old high school photos, the ones I buried so deep I prayed they'd stay forgotten. His eyes shifted, slow, sharp, like he was meeting a stranger. And in that breath, something in my chest cracked. Because he always said he loved me for who I am. But suddenly, I wasn't sure he even knew who that was. And the worst part? I couldn't tell if I should snatch the phone back or brace myself for the person he was about to become. The silence, after he found the photos, didn't end in that dorm room. It followed us like a shadow, trailing behind every step we took the next day. Ethan acted normal. Too normal. He laughed at jokes, nudged my shoulder, even held my hand, but something felt off, like there was a thin layer of ice sitting between our palms. Every time he looked at me, there was a flicker, a hesitation, like he was replaying those old pictures in his head, comparing the girl in them to the one beside him. And I hated how my stomach twisted, because I knew that look. It was the same one people used to give me in high school, the kind that made me feel too big, too awkward, too invisible. And now it was coming from the one person I trusted most. I kept telling myself it was in my head, but deep down I felt something shifting, slow and painful, like a bridge starting to crack under weight. By lunchtime, the weight on my chest felt heavier. Ethan kept asking shallow questions about homework, about weekend plans, anything that didn't require honesty. And I kept pretending I didn't notice the gap stretching wider between us. Every time I tried to bring up last night, his eyes drifted away, like there was something he didn't want to face. But the truth lingered in the space between our words. He'd seen a version of me he didn't expect. A version I worked so hard to grow from. I wasn't embarrassed of the girl I used to be, just terrified that he might be. And when he finally looked at me across the cafeteria table, his smile didn't reach his eyes. It hit me then. Love shouldn't feel like waiting for someone to decide if you're still enough. After lunch, I walked with him toward the science building, hoping he'd say something. Anything that made me feel like last night didn't change everything. But every small silence felt louder than the last. I caught myself studying his face, trying to read his thoughts, searching for that familiar warmth. Instead, I found uncertainty, like he was rethinking the person he thought I was. And it hurt. Not because of the photos, but because I realized how fragile his version of me might have been. The girl he said he loved was suddenly under a microscope. And I wasn't sure which part of me he was searching for, or which part he didn't want to see. By the time evening hit, everything inside me felt fragile. I replayed his expression again and again, the way his eyes changed when he saw those old photos. I didn't expect him to celebrate who I used to be. I just wanted him not to look at me like I had tricked him by growing into the person standing in front of him now. When we sat together back in my room, the air felt heavier than before. Ethan kept tapping his leg, staring at anything but me. I finally realized something that chilled me. He wasn't just processing. He was unsure. Unsure if the girl he claimed to love was still the girl he wanted. And that quiet doubt felt sharper than any argument ever could. The next morning, Ethan wasn't cold. He was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a door shutting softly, but still shutting. He didn't bring up the photos, and I didn't dare ask. Every minute felt like waiting for a truth neither of us wanted to say out loud. When he walked beside me to class, he kept a safe distance, like the space between us made everything easier to pretend. I tried to laugh at a joke he made, but it didn't sound like me. It sounded like someone trying to save something slipping through her fingers. And as we reached the building entrance, he hesitated, just for a second, before telling me he'd meet me later. That tiny pause said more than words ever could. Something had changed, and even though no one else noticed, I felt it in every part of me. By midday, the silence in my head felt louder than the noise around me. Lila noticed first. She always does. I hadn't even finished sitting down when she asked what was wrong. I tried brushing it off, but the words stuck in my throat. She watched me with that look, the one that says she already knows I'm lying. And when she finally asked, did he say something? I wished he had. At least then I'd know what I was fighting. Instead, I was left chasing pieces of a feeling I couldn't name. Lila didn't push, but her eyes softened in a way that made the truth harder to swallow. Because she believed I deserved someone who didn't flinch at my past. And deep down, I was starting to wonder if she was right. Later that afternoon, Ethan texted me. "Can we talk after class?" My stomach dropped. Those 4 words never mean something good. When we met outside the lab building, he didn't hug me. He didn't even smile. He just stood there, shifting his weight like he wasn't sure how to start. Finally, he said he didn't expect those old photos. As if the girl I used to be was some kind of scare. He tried to sound gentle, but the hesitation in his voice scraped against me like sandpaper. I nodded, trying to stay calm, but each word stung deeper because it confirmed what I feared. He wasn't just surprised, he was disappointed. And no matter how softly he said it, disappointment always lands the same. He kept talking, but every explanation made things worse. "It's just, you look so different," he said, like that was supposed to make me feel better. He didn't call me ugly or weird. He didn't have to. The meaning hid between his pauses, his careful tone, the way he kept searching my face for a reaction. I felt tears burn behind my eyes, but I held them back, not wanting to give him more power than he already had. I realized that he didn't see those photos as a part of my growth. He saw them as a flaw. And in that moment, something inside me dimmed, like a light flickering under the weight of doubt. I wished he'd reach for my hand. He didn't. When he finally stopped talking, I didn't know what to say. I wanted to defend myself, to remind him that the girl in those photos had survived things he'd never understand. But I stayed quiet. Not because I agreed with him, because I realized no explanation would change the way he looked at me now. He said he just needed time, like my past was something he had to recover from. I nodded slowly, even though it felt like swallowing glass. As he walked away, something heavy settled in my chest. I knew then that this wasn't just a small shift. It was the beginning of something breaking. The next day felt like walking through fog. Ethan barely texted, and when he did, his messages were short, half answers, half effort. My mind kept circling the same question. If he really loved me, why did one old photo shake him this much? I kept replaying the moment he found them, the way his face tightened, like he was looking at a stranger instead of someone he claimed to care about. By afternoon, the silence between us felt unbearable. I met him outside the dining hall, hoping we could talk honestly. But the moment he looked at me, I felt the truth settle in my stomach. He wasn't confused. He wasn't hurt. He was embarrassed. Embarrassed of the girl I used to be. And that realization felt heavier than any heartbreak I'd imagined. I asked him directly, finally, "Did those photos bother you?" His pause was too long, too sharp. He mumbled something about being thrown off, how he didn't expect me to look like that. And there it was. The truth he tried so hard to hide but couldn't shape into gentler words. My heart didn't break in a dramatic way. It just sank quietly, like a stone slipping underwater. He kept explaining, rambling about how people change, how it just surprised him. But the more he talked, the more I heard what he didn't say. He liked me more now because I fit some image he had built in his head. And that image didn't include the insecure, heavier, awkward girl I used to be. Hearing that felt like watching a door close that I thought was open. When I asked him what exactly bothered him, he hesitated again. This time, his answer cut deeper than anything before. "You just looked really different. I didn't know that was you." The way he said that felt like a punch. Suddenly, the girl I used to be, the one who struggled with weight, with confidence, with figuring out who she was, became something he didn't want to claim. It felt like he was separating me into two people, choosing one and rejecting the other. I swallowed hard, trying not to let the hurt show. But he must have seen it in my eyes because he grew quiet. The silence after his words was worse than the words themselves. It felt like the moment you finally see someone clearly and wish you didn't. Lila found me afterward. I didn't even have to say anything. One look at my face and she already knew. When I told her what Ethan had said, she didn't hide her reaction. She called it out instantly for what it was. Shallow, unfair, cruel in the quietest way. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word felt like she was rebuilding the pieces of me that had cracked. She reminded me that the girl in those photos wasn't someone to be ashamed of. She was someone who survived, someone who grew into the person standing here now. Hearing that made my chest ache, because it was the first time all day that something felt true. And I realized how badly I needed someone to remind me that worth doesn't vanish just because someone else can't see it. By nightfall, everything felt heavier than it should. I kept replaying his words, not because I agreed, but because I couldn't believe someone who claimed to love me could reduce my entire journey to a single reaction. I stood outside my dorm window, watching lights flicker across campus, realizing something quietly devastating. I wasn't losing him. I was realizing who he really was. And that truth hurt more than any breakup ever could. Part of me wished he'd just apologized, admitted he reacted badly, but instead he let the night fall without reaching out. And in that silence, I felt something shift inside me, a slow, steady understanding. Maybe the person I needed to defend wasn't my past self. It was the person I had become. The next day, everything in me felt stretched thin. I kept waiting for Ethan to text, to apologize, to explain something that made his words hurt less. But nothing came. By the afternoon, the pressure in my chest felt like it was squeezing the air out of me. When I finally saw him outside the library, he didn't look worried. He looked uncomfortable, like seeing me reminded him of something he didn't want to deal with. I walked up to him anyway, because I needed answers, even if they broke me. But when he spoke, it wasn't an apology. It was another excuse, disguised as sensitivity. He said he just needed space, like my past was something contagious. And something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in understanding. We weren't misunderstanding each other. He was showing me exactly who he was. He said he needed time to process everything, as if my past was a problem he had to solve. My heart felt like it was folding in on itself. I asked him what exactly he needed to process, and the way he hesitated told me everything. He wasn't confused. He wasn't confused. The air between us grew colder. With every second he refused to admit it. I felt anger rise. Not wild, sharp anger, but the slow, steady kind that comes from realizing someone you trusted never deserved that trust. He kept insisting he cared, but his words felt thin, stretched over something much harsher underneath. When he finally said, "I just didn't expect you to be that different," the world seemed to go quiet, and I knew then that his version of love had conditions I could never meet. I don't remember what finally pushed me, but suddenly everything I had been holding back poured out. I told him how unfair it was to treat my past like a flaw, how cruel it felt to be looked at differently because I didn't always look like the version of me he fell for. My voice didn't shake. It burned. Ethan tried defending himself, but every explanation just revealed another layer of what he really felt. He cared about appearances more than he wanted to admit. And when I asked him point blank if the girl in those photos embarrassed him, he didn't answer. Not right away. That silence was my answer. A clean, painful truth that cut through every excuse. I realized then that I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid I'd wasted this much of myself on someone who couldn't see me fully. I walked away from him before the tears could fall. I didn't owe him my breakdown. Lila found me again, sitting on a bench outside the dorms, staring at the sidewalk like it had answers. When I told her what happened, she didn't sugarcoat anything. She told me I deserved someone who loved every part of me, not just the parts that were convenient for them. Her voice wasn't soft. It was firm, angry on my behalf, and for the first time in days, I felt something like strength rise in my chest. Not because the pain was gone, but because I wasn't carrying it alone. Lila reminded me that the girl in those photos wasn't something to hide. She was proof that I grew, proof that I fought for the person I became, and hearing that made the ache in my chest loosen just enough to breathe again. By the time I went back to my room, the hurt was still there, but something inside me had shifted. I realized that I wasn't fighting for our relationship anymore. I was fighting for myself. My past wasn't a weakness. It wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was a part of me that took strength to outgrow. And if Ethan couldn't see that, then his love was never as deep as he claimed. I sat on my bed, staring at the quiet glow of my phone screen, knowing he wouldn't text, and finally understanding that maybe that was for the best. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't letting go of someone. It's letting go of the version of them you wished existed. And tonight, I finally did. The next morning, the whole campus felt louder than usual, laughing, shouting, moving, and I felt strangely disconnected from all of it. I thought avoiding Ethan would make things easier, but fate never cooperates like that. I saw him at the student gym entrance talking with his friends, acting like nothing was wrong. But the moment he spotted me, something in his expression shifted. Quick, sharp, defensive. I knew that look. The one people get when they care too much about how they appear. And that's when I noticed his friends looking between us, whispering. My chest tightened. Had he said something? Had he told them? I didn't want to assume, but the way they eyed me made my stomach twist. It felt like those old insecurities, the ones I fought so hard to bury, were clawing their way back up. A few hours later, my worst fear was confirmed. Lila came rushing into the cafe, breathless, holding her phone like it was burning her hand. Someone had posted one of my old high school photos on a campus group chat, the one I hated the most. I felt the blood drain from my face. I didn't even have to ask who sent it. Ethan's friends weren't subtle, and things like this don't spread on their own. My heart cracked in a way I didn't know it could. It wasn't just the photo. It was the humiliation of being exposed, made into a joke. Because someone I trusted couldn't handle my truth. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat there frozen, shame crawling over my skin. But beneath the pain, a small ember of anger began to glow. By late afternoon, my humiliation had turned into something sharper. I found Ethan outside the campus field, leaning against a bench, pretending everything was normal. When I confronted him, he acted clueless, swearing he didn't send anything. Maybe he didn't hit send himself, but he didn't stop it either. He didn't protect me. He didn't defend. He let it happen because part of him agreed with the joke. And when I said that, he didn't deny it. He just stared at the ground like my pain was an inconvenience. I realized then that the boy who once whispered that he loved me had never seen me. Only the version of me that fit his world. The version that made him look good. The conversation got worse. Ethan said he didn't think the photo was that big of a deal. The words hit me like ice water, not because he minimized the betrayal, but because he minimized me. He thought the damage was small because he couldn't feel it, because he didn't carry the weight of that old identity the way I did. I told him how cruel it felt, how exposed, how deeply personal that picture was. and he shrugged. Actually shrugged. Something in me hardened then. It wasn't love I felt anymore. It was clarity. Painful, clean, undeniable clarity. The kind that changes everything. When I finally walked away, I didn't feel weak. I felt awake. Every step carried a truth I had ignored for too long. That loving someone doesn't mean shrinking yourself to fit their comfort. My past wasn't something to hide. It wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was a reminder of everything I had overcome. And if he couldn't handle that, he never deserved the version of me standing here now. Lila hugged me when I reached the dorm, and for the first time all week, I didn't fall apart. I felt something steadier. Something like strength taking root in a place that used to be filled with fear. I wasn't done hurting, but I was done apologizing for who I used to be. The morning after everything fell apart, I woke up feeling strangely empty. Like the echoes of the hurt were still there. But the sharpness had faded. It wasn't healing. It was the numbness that comes right before you start rebuilding. I stayed in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone could twist something as personal as your past into a weapon. But then I remembered Lila's voice, steady and fierce. You don't owe anyone an apology for who you were. Those words settled somewhere deep inside me. They didn't erase the pain, but they made room for something else. Something like hope. Quiet, unfamiliar hope that maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I was just beginning again. And this time, I could do it without shrinking for anyone. By midday, Lila had dragged me out for coffee. Not because she thought I needed cheering up, but because she knew I needed routine. Something solid to hold on to. And she was right. The moment we sat down, something inside me loosened. I told her everything. Every word Ethan said, every look he gave, every moment I felt small again. And instead of pity, she gave me truth. She reminded me that the girl in those photos wasn't someone to run from. She was someone to thank. She was the one who fought through years of insecurity, who learned to love herself, who grew into the woman sitting here now. As I listened, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Not comfort exactly, but recognition. I wasn't someone broken by the past. I was someone shaped by it. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. Something I'd always avoided because it made me feel too exposed. I opened the folder of my old photos. I forced myself to look at the version of me I'd been running from. And instead of shame, something unexpected hit me. Compassion. I saw a girl who tried her best, even when the world made her feel small. A girl who didn't know yet how strong she would become. I didn't cry this time. I didn't flinch. I just breathed. And for the first time, I felt a strange pride push its way into the light. I wasn't hiding her anymore. I was finally seeing her. Later that night, I felt something shift, like a door opening inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't desperate for closure. I just wanted peace. And for the first time, I realized I could give it to myself. I didn't need Ethan to understand my past. I didn't need anyone's approval to own the woman I had become. Lila sat with me on the dorm steps as the sun dipped behind the buildings. And for a moment, everything felt still. Not because the pain was gone, but because it had finally found its place. I wasn't drowning in it anymore. I was learning to stand above it. And that made me feel stronger than I had in days. By the time I returned to my room, I felt something I hadn't felt since everything started. Clarity. Not the kind that comes from knowing what you want from someone else, but the kind that comes from finally knowing what you want for yourself. I didn't just want closure. I wanted my voice back. I wanted to confront him. Not to fix us, but to free myself. I deserved to speak the truth he tried to bury with his judgment. I deserved to walk away with my head high, not weighed down by what he couldn't understand. Tomorrow, I would face him. Not the girl in the old photos, not the girl who shrank herself for acceptance, but the woman who had finally learned to stand tall. The next morning, I didn't feel fear, not even anger, Just a calm, steady certainty that it was time to end this chapter the right way, on my terms. I walked across campus with a kind of strength that didn't feel borrowed or forced. It felt earned. Ethan texted me asking if we could talk, but for once, I didn't feel my stomach twist. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like that old version of myself who worried about being wanted. I felt whole. When I saw him waiting by the fountain, shifting awkwardly, I knew this wasn't about fixing anything. It was about freeing myself from the last piece of weight I'd been carrying. I wasn't there for him. I was there for me. When I reached him, he started talking first. Fast, messy, stumbling. He said he didn't mean to hurt me, that he didn't realize how the photo thing looked. But even as he talked, it felt empty, like words scraped together because silence felt heavier. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to see him clearly. I told him the truth. Calmly, simply. That he didn't just judge my past, he judged me. That he made me feel like the girl I once was wasn't worthy of being loved. And as I spoke, I realized something powerful. I wasn't breaking. I was letting go. Ethan looked stunned. Maybe even guilty, but guilt couldn't fix what had been cracked. I wasn't asking for repair. I was reclaiming myself. He tried to apologize then. Really apologize. But it was too late. Not because I hated him, but because I finally understood the truth. Someone who loves you doesn't make you feel like you need to hide pieces of yourself to be accepted. I told him that. I told him I deserved someone who loved every version of me, even the ones still learning, still growing. His eyes softened with something like regret. But regret isn't healing. Regret is just a shadow of what could have been. And for the first time since everything started, I didn't feel the urge to fix anything. I felt relieved, light, like I could finally breathe again. When I finally walked away from him, there was no dramatic ending, no final explosion of tears. Just a quiet peace settling into my bones. The weight I'd carried for so long. Fear of judgment, fear of not being enough, fear of my past, lifted. And standing just beyond the courtyard, waiting like she always does, was Lila. The second she saw my face, she knew. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She pulled me into a hug, strong and grounding, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't holding myself together with shaking hands. I felt steady. I felt seen. I felt whole. That night, sitting on my bed with the window cracked open and the cool air brushing against my skin, I realized something simple but life-changing. I didn't lose anything. I didn't lose love. I didn't lose a future. I didn't lose a person meant for me. I lost someone who never saw me clearly, and in that loss, I found something better, myself. I didn't need to hide my old photos anymore. I didn't need to be afraid of the girl I used to be. Every version of me deserved love. And now, for the first time, I could finally give that love to myself without hesitation. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of the one I finally chose.